What's up, everybody? Welcome to For New Eyes Only, the James Bond retrospective podcast where I'm watching the movies for the first time. Nathan, it's been a little while. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well, man. Just been catching up on my reading, catching up on my movies. And, you know, it's funny. The next episode we're doing is we're going to do something a little different this time, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But the next episode we're doing got pushed back a little bit. Personal things happen, but it gave me an opportunity to rewatch, and rewatch the next movie, and changed my perception on it a little bit from before. So
cool.
That's kind of the fun thing about doing this show, is like I'm kind of discovering new things about this series that I already love. But yeah, how have you been, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Like, as you said, some life stuff, gets in the way sometimes.
Totally.
So that's why it's been a little bit of a gap between Live and Let Die and where we're going to be going. Man with the Golden Gun is coming next, but we're doing a little bit of a special episode here.
Yeah.
Call it a mini episode if you want to. But we've had such a great response on the videos that we've put out so far, and our reviews of the movies, and my perspective as a first time viewer, and people that have been watching these movies for a long time have left us some great comments on our videos. So I figured it would be a great idea to highlight some of the comments we've gotten on some of our videos and sort of talk about them a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, like, I've learned some stuff from our listeners / viewers. I mean, it's funny that the premise of this show being I'm a huge fanboy guiding you through these movies. And I do want to make it clear, I am not an expert. I'm not a scholar when it comes to James Bond. I just have so much passion for this character, for this franchise. It's something that always makes me happy. And so, like, the whole idea of this show is just me sharing that joy with you, one of my dearest friends. So just to make that clear, I am cool with corrections and any kind of trivia you guys want to throw my way, because like I'm never through learning about this character.
Yeah, and one of the things that I was quite shocked by is some of the people that are leaving comments are people that were, alive in their 20s when Thunderball came out. Like,
that was rad.
They experienced the theatrical experience of going to see the newest Bond movie. Yeah. We don't really care for Diamonds Are Forever all that much, but hearing some of these people talk about, like, when they went to the theater and saw it when they were 20, it was a massive success, and they were all just like standing up cheering in the theater because Connery was back as Bond.
Yeah, right, of course.
My name is Bond. James Bond.
Well, and the same thing with Thunderball. Like, I fully understand that, like, that movie was a revelation, and it changed the course of undersea photography. I mean, it literally is like a watershed moment in action filmmaking. It doesn't play super compelling now, but that does not take anything away from how impressive that movie is.
No, not at all. Like, we completely respect the filmmaking aspect of these
100%,
movies.
yes.
There's a lot that goes into it. I mean, we've talked about the car chases in these movies, the boat chases. We've got plenty more car chases and boat chases to come.
Boy, howdy, do we ever. I have a specific note that for Man with the Golden Gun, when I started laughing and I was like, I want to know how Josh felt about this. Just knowing what you said about Live and Let Die. I'm chomping at the bit to talk about that tonight as well.
Well, we will be getting Man with the Golden Gun out for everybody as soon as possible. We're actually going to record that tonight as well, but we wanted to take the time to showcase people who have been listening, people who have been watching, and people who have given us some pointers, some comments, some positives, some negatives. So we just wanted to point a couple of those things out and talk about them a little bit. Again, I'm watching all these movies for the first time, so if I'm saying anything out of line, absolutely, you can call me out on it.
And we want this show to be fun. Like, we want like fun for us and fun for the listener. And so, if you have constructive feedback, we're super into it. Absolutely.
For sure. And I know, James Bond is like Batman to some people. I mean, he's probably equal to Batman for you.
He's pretty close.
This is a guy that people hold in high regard, that they've been watching.
My Trinity, it's Batman, Spider-Man, and James Bond.
That'd be a great team up right there.
I'd watch it for sure.
Yeah, big time. But, I understand this is sacred to people, and I don't want to tarnish anybody's view of James Bond with my opinions, but that's exactly what they are, is opinions.
Yes.
So everybody's got them. Some are good, some are bad, but this is what this show is. It's me giving my take on watching these old Bond movies now. And I can only think of it in the headspace that I am currently as a 42-year-old adult.
Sure.
So it's just the life that I've lived and what I've experienced and how these movies resonate with me as a 42-year-old man now. That's the opinions that I'm giving when I watch these movies. So
yeah, for sure.
Again, like if I'm ruining anything for anybody by giving you my opinions, I am very sorry, but it's all in good fun.
And one of the things that I think is so joyful about watching these movies is you can literally chart the change in filmmaking. Like you can chart the history of filmmaking watching the Bond movies, at least modern, action blockbuster popcorn filmmaking. I last week I decided to rewatch Tomorrow Never Dies for the first time in years and had a blast, but it was also just like, wow, like this is a 90s fucking Bond movie. When we get into Man with the Golden Gun, we can talk about changing trends in 1970s filmmaking.
For sure.
And I just think that it's so fun to look at these as the time capsules they are, but also, as a sort of a historical record. And as a historical record, there are things in our history that haven't held up very well, or that are, we aren't particularly proud of. And I think one of the things that has come up with some of our commenters that I'd love to approach, right off the bat, get the hard stuff out of the way, if that's cool.
Right.
I hope, my sincere hope is that, we've leveled some criticisms at elements of these movies that have not aged particularly well. And my intention is to never come across as performative in any way, or that I'm casting judgment on these movies. I get that things change with the times, and there are things that were in movies. On Silver Linings Playlist, my other podcast, we've talked about movies from the early 2000s where we can't believe people are just using the F slur left and right, know, and it's just not really done now. And at the time, like, that was just a joke you could make, and it was, an instant laugh line. And now, I just feel like we love these movies, like, but that doesn't mean that there aren't elements to them that we wish weren't, that are a little ugly. Like I like Goldfinger a lot. The fact that Bond holds a woman down and kisses her until she's not gay anymore fucking sucks.
What would it take for you to see things my way?
A lot more than you've got.
And I think that it's okay for us to talk about these things and still, find entertainment value in the intentions of the filmmakers. I don't think that anybody set out to make, I don't think that anybody had like bad intentions making these movies.
Right. Right,
some folks. Go ahead.
The filmmakers are just, it's all a sign of the times. It's the time that you're making these movies in, and that's something that some commenters have brought up as well. Mm-hmm. Like, this was the time these movies came out. Yeah. It's almost like the conversation you have about grandma and grandpa. They grew up in a different time. It's different for them.
They're gonna say some stuff that's not gonna hit right.
I'm sure this ain't exactly your debut with this sort of thing.
Right. And that's really what it is. Is like, Live and Let Die. It's a movie that I love so much. That doesn't mean that I wish the representation in it was a little stronger.
Right.
But that being said, it is 100% a product of its time. I mean, it's coming out around movies like Shaft and Foxy Brown and Dolomite, and they're jumping on those trends, and it's a lot of fun. You can have a lot of fun with it. But I think, any kind of analysis deserves a little bit of time to talk about the things that are uncomfortable. I've read most of the Fleming novels, something we'll get into a little bit later, that there are very ugly elements where his personal prejudices showed through in the text.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that I think James Bond is an abhorrible character, that I don't enjoy the escapism and excitement of these stories, but there are things that I don't particularly embrace in the text.
If we were writing Bond now, we would write it a little differently.
Sure, absolutely.
And
in fact, you will see that as the movies go on, no real spoilers here, but when we get into the 80s and the Dalton era, Bond's written a little more monogamously, because when these movies are coming out at the height of the AIDS epidemic, or the AIDS crisis, and people are like, well, we probably shouldn't put a character on screen and idealize someone sleeping around willy-nilly, as while we're still figuring out this scary thing. And I think the character has grown with the times, and you look back on old Justice Society comics and Superman is spanking Wonder Woman because she got out of line. That's not fucking happening in 2023 DC Comics, Nope. And it doesn't mean that there is no value in older superhero comics. It just means that, we're not doing that anymore.
Exactly. And, one thing I do want to bring up is someone did call out, how we were pointing out the fact that all of the black characters in Live and Let Die were quote
majority
unquote
of them
bad characters, but they managed to say, you don't care out Harry Strutter. When he shows up, he actually saves the day in one point. And yes, there's a very good point to that, but there's also the point that Harry's not really treated with a whole lot of,
fanfare or excitement.
Right.
Or
I mean,
respect.
he's in 2 scenes of the movie and then killed in the 3rd scene he's in.
But that is a fair point from one of our viewers. That's a great character. That's an interesting character. I would love to see more of him. It doesn't really negate the fact that there are issues with the representation in the movie, but that is a fair point. There are attempts, and it was new territory for the Bond movies. So, it is still, it's still commendable that the movie took Bond out of his comfort zone, put him in this kind of situation, cast an actor of Yaphet Kotto's caliber as the lead actor. I think that listener makes a very valid point.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're talking about character within all of this.
Yes.
The acting performances in Live and Let Die are phenomenal. We did nothing but praise the actor who played Teehee performance in that movie. We did nothing but praise Yaphet Kotto's performance in that movie. So,
and my goal here is to not sound super defensive.
Right.
I do think, it's worth restating some of our intentions and to say that, like, we do love that movie. I mean, I think I love it a little bit more than you do, but
it's a fun time, man. I don't dislike Live and Let Die at all.
But these are difficult conversations, and I think they're worth having when you go through these movies. And again, we're looking at this, 50 years on, like literally, like 50 years later. We're just thinking in terms of like, okay, well, what would we have done differently, or how would this movie have been made now? And maybe I'm wrong, I think it's worth pointing out some of the things that don't sit right with us.
Right.
Just in the same way that I would with any film that came out now, or if I saw something that, just hit different, it's worth having a conversation about.
Exactly. Absolutely. So that's some of the negative we've heard so far, and we've got a couple of things that I'll address. And
even then, I don't even necessarily think it's a negative comment. It's just, it's worth. I think it's worth pointing out my point of view, but also saying that I love these movies. Like I'm not trying to be performative. I'm not trying to be quote unquote woke. It's just I'm just saying, observations, right. and you coming to this as someone who's never seen it before, with 50 years of history between then and now, I think it's a fair reaction.
Right. I fully respect the whole, masculine male hero aspect of the Bond movies, but I also don't like when Bond's slapping girls around, whether they're villains or not. It just doesn't sit well with me. So that's just my opinion, as I said.
Yeah.
But
can you imagine if Spider-Man did that in like one of these movies? He just punched Zendaya. Like we'd all lose our minds.
Mary Jane. Yeah. And then Zendaya would throw Spider-Man off of a building.
Oh, Zendaya would wreck his shit. Zendaya. We should also mention the Lazenby of it all.
Yes. Yeah. We literally, just before we started recording, a comment popped up on the on Her Majesty's Secret Service episode I thought was funny and I felt we needed to bring up.
Totally.
This comment comes from Phil Newton /England. I guess he's from England. And his comment was, funny how one of you pronounced it Lazenby and the other Lazenby.
It's so, and in fact, halfway through that episode, I change it. And it's because I've heard both.
Yes.
I have heard both. I believe he says like George Lazenby himself says Lazenby. So I'm inclined to go with his pronunciation.
And anybody who has watched our VHS Files episodes and listened to our podcast on there, you would know that I'm terrible with names in general. So the fact that I'm even saying someone's name is usually a gift. But, pronunciations, I will get them wrong. Feel free to call me out on it all you want to. It doesn't bother me, but I did find that comment pretty funny.
And it is. Hang on one sec. I want to check this. I want to double check.
Lazenby.
Okay, Lazenby. So then never mind. I'm an asshole.
28-year-old George Lazenby, a former car salesman from Australia.
And to be fair, I don't think they were trying to point out which way is right and which way is wrong. It's just that we were saying it differently.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I've heard it both ways. Google says Lazenby. George Lazenby says Lazenby. So who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
Probably he knows his name.
You know who we're talking about.
Yeah. But it is funny when we were re-listening to that episode. When I was re-listening to that episode when it dropped, I was like, I don't remember saying it like that. And then I started saying it differently, like at the hour mark. And I was like, what happened in my brain? It's
There's nothing
so
more
funny,
nerve-wracking than going back and listening to an episode or something and going, noticing you did something completely wrong.
Totally.
And you're like, damn it. Why didn't I catch that?
Totally. There's an episode of Silver Linings Playlist where my co-host and I say a character's name in a Denis Villeneuve film like completely differently the whole time. Like each of us, like both of us are adding different consonants that like aren't in the. It happens. We watch a lot of movies.
Denis Villeneuve is a perfect example because people pronounce that name wrong all the time. And I don't even know what the right pronunciation of it is. So I
might have just said it wrong. And that might have even proved my point more.
We're going to get the comments. It's Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, it's scene keenery.
Well, I do want to point out a couple of comments that we got on the Live and Let Die episode that I thought were great. One of them comes from Martin Barrett, I believe is the name.
Okay.
Loving these Bond videos. They just get better and better. I'm so glad I found this channel. Well, Martin, we're glad you found the channel as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I know they don't come out as often as some people have probably wanted. I have gotten comments where people are like, when's the next episode coming out?
Oh, yeah.
And that's the one thing I do want to lay out as we're talking about this as well is, Nathan and I do this when we can, as often as we can.
Yeah.
But we both have a lot of different things going on.
Totally.
This was one of those things that we were like, we're going to do this, but it's going to be no pressure. We'll do it when we can.
Yeah.
And
because when it becomes an obligation, it becomes a little less fun.
Yes.
And that's ultimately what this is about, is enjoying the joy of discovery for you and the joy of revisiting for me.
Yeah. And it's funny because...
And these movies are long. They typically are pretty long.
and the funny thing is the Bond episodes are really getting a lot more views than some of the other videos on the VHS Files feed.
Yeah.
And I thank you guys so much for that. I'm so glad that you're liking the episodes. But
it was so cool to drop that rock episode and have so many views within like 24 hours. Like everyone checking this out, I sincerely thank you. Like, even if you don't love everything we have to say, like, thank you so much for taking the time to watch it and for leaving comments. Like, I hope that, again, like, I hope that us doing a response episode doesn't discourage anybody from leaving us feedback.
We had another positive comment on the Live and Let Die. You guys should have way more views. This is top-notch Bond discussion. But what happened to part 1? So I want to go ahead and put this out there as well if anybody's watching this.
Oh, right, because part 1 got copyrighted, right? Copy striked.
That's another thing that puts a little bit of a damper on the Bond episodes, and it's a typical thing with YouTube. We're using a lot of footage from these movies, and I'm trying to figure out where the sweet spot is in YouTube stuff for that. But we do get copyright claims on some of these videos when I do the first pass, so therefore I have to go back and do re-edits. I just don't want to get any kind of copyright claims on the videos, so sometimes that definitely puts the video back a little bit. The problem with Live and Let Die was, I believe, the video was long, the movie is long, and I think it was
our video was almost the exact length of the movie.
Right.
I think is what really tripped up YouTube's like auto-generated copyright
and
scanner or whatever it's called.
I'm fairly certain all of this is AI that's flagging these videos, but I think when you have a video or a podcast that's as long as the movie is, they're thinking, oh, they're just putting this entire movie on YouTube, which is not what we're doing. I mean, there are channels out there that put a lot more footage of movies in videos than we do. We're just kind of trying to do a running commentary, but that does set us back sometimes. And with Live and Let Die, I split it into 2 episodes because that kept us from getting a copyright claim on it. So there are 2 parts to Live and Let Die. So if you do see, there's 2 different thumbnails. There's one with Bond on it. There's one with Baron Samedi on it. So there are 2 videos for the full episode of Live and Let Die. If you're curious, I'll leave them linked in the comment box below, so you can find those there if you've been kind of wondering what's going on. Why is there only one? Why are you only talking about half the movie? That's the explanation.
Well, and there's also it's led us to rethink a lot of the way we do this show, right?
Yes.
I mean, VHS Files has sort of changed some of the formatting for the show, and we're going to be kind of switching things up a little bit going forward. It really hit me during the On Her Majesty's Secret Service episode because that movie is just engraved in my brain where I'm re-listening to it. I'm like, I'm literally just reciting whole scenes from memory. And, that's not necessarily the most exciting thing for a viewer to watch. Right. And so we're going to kind of mix things up a little bit, do a little more,
streamlined conversation about some of the
more conversation, less summary. So I think going forward, our episodes may be slightly shorter. We'll find out. But I think we'll also be a little more pointed and less right now, like listening back to especially On Her Majesty's Secret Service, I feel like I'm very much doing a Chris Farley show kind of thing where I'm like, hey, Josh, you remember when Blofeld hypnotized all those girls? That was awesome. Like, you remember when Bond proposed to Tracy? That was great.
And we've gotten quite a few comments on the On Her Majesty's Secret Service,
which makes
episode.
sense. One of the most divisive films in the series, and a movie that I think people are rediscovering.
And divisive in the comments because you've got people in the comments also saying Lazenby is great. He's the best Bond. It's the best Bond movie. You've also got other people on the other side of the coin that are saying Lazenby can't act. Lazenby didn't deserve to be Bond. Well, it's
here's the thing. Both people are right because he's not good the whole time. Right.
But it's the culmination of every aspect of On Her Majesty's Secret Service that really ropes that into being something special. You do have a guy who's green coming in playing Bond, but it's a little bit better than what we'd saw Connery doing in the past 2 movies. It was a breath of fresh air, and the story is a little more compelling. We're actually seeing Bond and
still having a problem not cheating on his fiance, but sure.
Right. So again, we do have issues with On Her Majesty's Secret Service as well. But
I think the overarching Blofeld's plan is pretty goofy, but it's leveraged by the fact that Telly Savalas is so fucking good in that movie. Diana Rigg is the be all end all Bond girl for me. I do adore that movie, but it was really cool to see people so passionate about it. Like I don't think you're wrong to say that he's not the best actor to play Bond, and I totally get some of the criticisms, but it's a movie that just like hits me in the heart every time.
Right. And this brings us to a comment that we've kind of jumped into the comments. We do have an article we're going to talk about as well coming up, but since we're talking about On Her Majesty's Secret Service, I sent this comment to you, and this is kind of what sparked. Hey, maybe we should do a listener comments episode.
Yeah,
we've got one here from Nostalgia Gaming Retro, and it says, I used to get pretty confused with a lot of the things in the timeline pre-Craig era. The encounters with Blofeld not lining up, how old Bond was meant to be when Brosnan showed up, if indeed he was meant to be the same guy.
Right, which we've covered that fan theory on our episode on The Rock.
Right. He's heard the codename theory as well. But this person says that he has come up with the multiverse theory.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay,
Which
this is fun.
I found kind of interesting. He says, I know it seems like lazy writing or something comic books do, which you're playing to the crowd here because we both love and read comic books.
And I have a fucking comic book podcast.
Right. And he says, but this would make a lot of sense. In this case, Lazenby. Now I'm wondering how to pronounce it.
Lazy boy.
Lazenby could have done all of the same things Connery did. We just never saw him do them, perhaps in his timeline. You Only Live Twice hadn't happened yet in his timeline, per se, which I find pretty interesting.
I mean, that is totally fair because On Her Majesty's Secret Service is a really mostly strict adaptation of the novel, which the novel takes place immediately before You Only Live Twice.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and that's what he gets into here. He's like, you go through all the Bond eras this way and pick them apart. It's the James Bond multiverse. Perhaps after Tracy's death, Lazenby's Bond, who was grief stricken, went into retirement. And that's why we never saw him again. He says if Amazon, who owns the rights to the Bond franchise now, he thinks, wanted to, make a TV show or something like that, they could branch a timeline off of that with new stories, and Lazenby could return to be like a mentor at MI6 for new recruits, like Kingsman style or something of that nature. So, in an effort for a new generation to take down the latest criminal organization, he says he's not a script writer, but clearly it could be one plausible way to connect these actors and these timelines and make it, a lot more cohesive. And I commend you, Nostalgia Gaming Retro, because that's a very,
awesome.
very cool take on this.
That's really fun. And he's right. There are references in later movies that sort of point to Roger Moore being the same guy that Lazenby and Connery both played, but you could play with the idea, and there's still things that don't line up, right? Like Blofeld should recognize James Bond and vice versa. But there are. It's a fun little brain teaser, right? Like for the longest time, there was a theory up until Spectre came out. There was a theory that Daniel Craig's James Bond went through Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. Then he went on every mission we saw in the previous films before Skyfall happened, which I still think is kind of a fun theory. Yeah. The idea that this all happened, we just didn't see it, and it's still the same character. Yeah. But there's a lot of really fun fan theories out there. This is the first kind of compelling multiverse theory I've ever heard. And man, the idea of an elderly Bond training new recruits is very fun for me. I mean, that was kind of the fun exercise of doing The Rock on this show. And just, what would that be like? That would be super fun.
Speaking of the Rock episode, we talk about how that could be Sean Connery's Bond playing that character in that movie, and someone did call out the prom queen quote that's in that movie. Apparently, in England, there are no proms to speak of, so he says the joke doesn't make much sense. But I don't know if it was taken in the right context, anything like that. But
the proms in England is a very different thing. I mean, there's the BBC proms, which are like these promenade concerts. But I admit to being mostly ignorant of the intricacies there.
Okay, so we're gonna go to another negative for On Her Majesty's Secret Service here.
Okay, yeah.
This is from Timbuktu, which I'm sure is a fake name, but every now and then someone comes along and sings the praises of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I rewatch it and come to the conclusion that this was the worst Bond ever made.
Yeah, I saw this one.
First and foremost, Lazenby laughed at Bond. That is unforgivable. Diana Rigg was perfect as Emma Peel. She was miscast in this. I don't agree with that.
Disagree. Yeah.
But then I didn't watch the Avengers, so I don't have that to compare to.
I'm an Avengers fan.
Yeah.
I mean, I own a box set of all of the Emma Peel episodes. I love Diana Rigg so much. I can see watching her performance in this and feeling something off just because the chemistry with Lazenby is not always there.
Right.
But I adore her so much.
Yeah. And again, this could be a generational thing. I see great things in both of those things, the actors, the story, everything. And he says, Telly Savalas was also bad in this movie.
Oh no. Okay.
Says, Telly is a great American big city tough guy, but not an Eastern European supervillain.
That's totally fair. He does not play Blofeld as written. He is fully doing. I think that is a completely fair assessment. Like Telly Savalas is like the kingpin in this movie.
Right. But I found that one interesting. It kind of plays against what we said about this. But again, opinions vary.
And I also think it's fair to have issues with Lazenby for the fact that he sort of like shit on the series once he left. Like that was such a contentious break from the franchise. And the way that he sort of just dismissed the whole thing when he left totally makes sense that would leave a bad taste in your mouth. I have a problem when I see a movie and I know that the actor kind of shit on the art form. I mean, it's one of controversial statement. It's one of my problems with the Joker movie is that, the director Todd Phillips has sort of like been very disdainful of comic books in general.
Right.
And so I'm always just sort of like, well, but you fucking made one of these. Like, so I completely, and it sort of put a bad taste in my mouth for that film. And I fully see why that would put you off of George Lazenby. That being said, I still really like him. I think he's one of those guys who he has no fucking clue what he's doing. Right. And because of that, he has no instincts. And because he has no instincts, he's just sort of giving an honest performance. And it doesn't always work. In some of the more hard ass moments, I don't really totally buy him. Right. But in the romance scenes, there's something about him that's just very innocent and pure that I don't think we've ever really gotten from a Bond, except for maybe some of Dalton's scenes and some of Craig's scenes, especially in Casino Royale. Not to say that his performance is anywhere on the level of those two seasoned actors, but right. I don't know. There's something interesting about Lazenby to me, but I totally respect if it doesn't work for you.
Sure. And, just with it being the odd movie out, too. I mean, it's the only time we've seen a departure from someone not playing Bond for a long period of time, or at least, at least 2 to 3 movies. I know Dalton only did 3.
Two.
I'm sorry, 2.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's another part of Bond that I'm interested to get to. I am
so excited for you to see Timothy Dalton. Yeah.
But we'll go ahead and move on past On Her Majesty's. We've creamed our pants about that one enough.
Sure.
But I do wanted to highlight a couple of comments from Diamonds Are Forever. We've got one here from Thomas Chaco. Says, without a doubt, the worst of Connery's Bond films and a foretaste of the crap to follow. Again, thanks, Guy Hamilton and Tom Mankiewicz. Wow. I don't know if it was their fault.
We'll be talking about that in the next episode for sure. Not entirely wrong. I mean, I think you know what? I will say you are correct. Diamonds Are Forever is a fucking mess. It's a mess that I enjoy just because of how bizarre and weird it is. It's very camp. There's parts of that movie to me that feel very Batman 66. It is a bad movie, though. I will be the first person to say Diamonds Are Forever, bad film. And that's someone as saying that as someone who liked it, I think a little bit more than Josh did.
Well, he goes on to say, we went from On Her Majesty's Secret Service to this.
Yeah, right.
And, he says Connery started sleepwalking back in Thunderball.
Yes.
And he said he redeemed himself with Never Say Never Again. So we'll eventually get there at some point.
Yeah.
Another one here, and this is actually a positive for Diamonds Are Forever. This comes from Howard Weber. I first saw Diamonds Are Forever opening day, 1971, December.
Bless.
He was 20 at the time. This is the one I kind of foreshadowed to earlier. Now you have to remember two things he says. It had been 4.5 years since Connery played James Bond, and also how popular he was. When the gun barrel sequence came on screen, there was thunderous applause from the audience. Then when Connery appeared and said, "My name is Bond, James Bond," the audience cheered and applauded.
Hell yeah.
Diamonds Are Forever has always been my top 5 favorite Bond movies, along with On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Goldfinger, and Dr. No. I noticed that you said favorite, not best. There's a big difference there because there is no best. When someone says best, it's their personal opinion, not mine or yours. Diamonds Are Forever may not be the best Bond film, but it's one of the most enjoyable for him.
And that is that's
point.
My whole point.
Yep.
Yes. This show is not meant to be some kind of authoritative, this is the law of James Bond, you know. We are coming at this as people who really enjoy this series and just want to talk about what's fun about it and saying, you know, some of the ugly parts, but mostly like this is a love fest. Like and even like the worst James Bond movie, I still have a fun time watching. I think that's absolutely a valid opinion. And when you can go back, I spend a couple of hours talking about why Diamonds Are Forever is such a fun, campy time for me, even though I recognize it's not a great movie.
Right.
Oh, it's got Mr. Went and Mr. Kidd.
Yeah. I mean, Mr. Went and Mr. Kidd in that one, there's definitely things to enjoy about
I love
Diamonds
Jill
Are
St.
Forever.
John in that movie. She's so silly, but
Yes.
I adore her.
Keep leaning on that tutor, Charlie, and you're gonna get a shot in the mouth.
You know, the problems I have with the character in that movie, I don't place on the actress. She's great in the movie. I think she's good. I think the character has some faults. And
I mean, she's the dry run for Agent Goodnight, which we will fucking get to next time.
Another one. Okay, so we're going to move on to a comment from You Only Live Twice.
Yes.
And I have to say, I kind of blushed a little bit when I read this one. So,
oh, wow.
This comes from Connor Freeman. He says, "You guys are outdoing the Bond community YouTube channels with these videos.
Aww.
Your enthusiasm is contagious, and it's so much fun to see these movies through new eyes for a change." Nathan is Nathan is the perfect expert to tour guide and accompany a fellow film lover through his awesome series.
That's so nice.
Yes, and like I said,
Thank you.
I was so happy when I saw that comment. So Connor Freeman, thank you so much. I'm glad you're enjoying this. And, you know, that's been a lot of the fun for me. I kind of touched on it in the Connery rankings episode with The Rock. You know, like you said at the beginning of this, I love just kind of seeing the evolution of filmmaking through this.
Yeah.
And I pointed out every time we talk about one of these Bond movies about how, you know, Christopher Nolan took this, Steven Spielberg took this. You know, if it wasn't for the Bond movies, we probably wouldn't have Indiana Jones. We wouldn't have Inception.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah.
So I mean, for all the faults that there are with this series, mainly due to the time period they were made, I absolutely see and respect what these movies are and how they helped film evolve over time.
Absolutely. We also got one comment on Her Majesty's Secret Service that made me a couple of comments of people just like, holy shit, I can't believe you guys feel this way about the movie that I do, you know, and that was really cool. It's been really nice seeing all the feedback we've gotten, but just that was so kind. Yeah.
And I'll end it off on one from Russia with Love.
Yeah.
We gushed about Red Grant in that movie and how great of a goon he was, how great of a villain he plays in that movie.
It's my favorite Connery.
Imran from YouTube has a different take on Red Grant. He says,
sure,
as cool and deadly as Grant was, he ultimately ruined Kronstein and by extent Spectre's plan. Typical talkative villain, arrogant when one-on-one with his enemy under his mercy. To his credit, this weakness didn't spell his doom because Bond won through tenacity and help of a hidden weapon. But again, Grant ruined the plan. Bond got the truth about Smersh, not the big bad. Grant gloated over the English and the Russians pinned against each other and made for fools. And then Tatiana having been betrayed. He goes on, but he apparently has some issues. He does praise Robert Shaw's performance in this movie.
No, he's not wrong. There's Red Grant. His cockiness is his undoing, really. I mean, he didn't have to force that confrontation with Bond when he did.
Right.
And he just sort of gives up everything. He's totally right. I mean, he also, in doing these sort of calculated assassinations, he's more showing off than actually fulfilling the mission.
Right. Yeah, and they recruited him to do this. It's not like Smersh, it's not like he was,
right.
He kind of went off on his own a little bit there at the end, and it definitely makes sense. But it doesn't take away from the fact that he's an ice cold villain in that movie.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is Robert Shaw's performance carrying that character for us, because there's not a whole lot on the page, right?
My orders are to kill you and deliver the lector. How I do it's my business. It'll be slow and painful.
Right. And if you really want to talk about that, we talk about the tropes that are being developed within these movies as we go through them. Every villain, every big bad in these movies does the typical, I'm going to tell you my whole plan before things go bad.
Yeah.
So, to lay that on Red Grant, it's like, you can lay that on pretty much any of the villains in these movies.
That's true. But that's fun. I like having it laid out like that. That's very true. That Red Grant kind of fucks everything up for the bad guys in that movie, and then dies terribly.
Yeah. But again,
we get that great train fight out of it.
Train fight. So I mean that's the gist of the stuff that I picked out of the comments, the stuff that I thought would be cool to talk about, the things that I would people that are kind of gloating over our show a little bit. It's nice to get a little bit of recognition from people that are watching. So thank you so much for all the comments and watching. We're blown away by the views and the comments and all of the interaction we're getting over these episodes. So again, thank you very much. I guess we'll go ahead and close out with an article that we kind of, we've been talking about all these.
Off mic,
Yeah, we've been talking about all of these issues with the movies and how times have changed. Things don't really, translate as well as they did in the 60s to the 2020s. And so you sent me this article, Ian Fleming's estate backs controversial James Bond edits.
Yeah.
And
so essentially,
this is interesting.
Yeah, these sensitivity experts have been brought in to essentially rework passages of the Bond novels to make them more palatable for a re-release for the character's 70th anniversary. And
namely, as you brought up in the Live and Let Die episode, and Live and Let Die is kind of the hot topic here. Live and Let Die was the main thing that was talked about in this article.
Live and Let Die uses the N-word a ton in the book, and there are sequences in which characters speak phonetic ebonics, and there's some stuff that's just very hard to swallow. And that's the majority of the changes that are being made to the text, where they're removing a lot of racial references from the books. Now, there's not really a clear answer yet of whether we're getting changes to some of the more sexually charged dialogue in the books. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that Bond says in sort of internal monologue form in the books that are pretty upsetting about women. There's a sequence in most prominently in the novel of The Spy Who Loved Me. There's a sequence where a character characterizes Bond sleeping with her as almost like a sexual assault, and she's enjoying it, and that's not great. Obviously.
Nope.
And it's a lot of stuff that just like reading it kind of takes you back. I was taken aback reading these books for the first time. That being said, I'm always a little, look, I'm not a sensitivity expert.
Right.
But one of the things that I've appreciated about things like HBO Max or Disney Plus is presenting media as it was originally created and adding a disclaimer for context.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm a little, the idea of going back and essentially rewriting whole passages of Fleming's books, I don't know. I'm not a fan. I disagree with a lot of that man's views, as we will, as we have discussed and will continue to discuss throughout this series. But yeah, the idea of just sort of re-envisioning, revising his text is very, I don't know, it doesn't sit totally right with me. And what's odd is the Fleming estate has essentially been like, we think Ian would have been on board with this, and I was like, I don't fucking think so.
Of course, I'm a certain age, so that the whole thing's rather stale news to me, but I think it's unnecessary, really. I think you can convey.
Like, I really don't. Fleming, the similar thing just happened with Roald Dahl's novels. Roald Dahl, a great writer, brilliant mind, but also outspoken anti-Semite. I don't know. It's weird. Like, you have to reckon with these texts as they were written.
Right.
I'm of two minds about this. On the one hand, I think, yes, this text is outdated, but on the other, I get weird about censorship. So right. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's an odd conundrum.
And from reading the article, I went through it, and I think it's mostly, it says, it was announced that Fleming's books have been revised to omit racist language and a number of racial references.
Right.
I'll leave a link to the article in the description
it's
box.
Interesting that it's happening, and I do think it helps that the Fleming estate has signed off on it, but I don't know. I'm always kind of curious about these kind of things because I enjoy, some of the old Looney Tunes cartoons even are, a hard sit, but they, like, when you watch them on HBO, there was a disclaimer at the beginning that's like, it was a different time. This hasn't aged particularly well. Even watching Dumbo on a Disney Plus, there's a disclaimer at the top, and I think it helps to give those things context.
It reminds me this is also someone who's been in the limelight and controversial lately, but the Dave Chappelle skit he did a long time ago where he's talking about Pepe Le Pew, and he's like,
and we watched Pepe Le Pew, and I'm old now. I'm looking like, good God, what kind of fucking rapist is this guy? Like, take it easy, Pepe.
So, like, yeah, there's things in children's cartoons that were not quite PC back in the 60s and 70s. So, and we watched that stuff on repeat. So it's definitely something that's hard to swallow when you say we're gonna change these nostalgic things from your childhood and your adolescence, but you've also gotta realize times are a changing, as Bob Dylan put it. And
it's the same approach that I think we have with this show, right? Like, I disagree with things that happen in these movies, and so it's worth having a conversation about them instead of just getting rid of them. Right. Granted, there are things in those novels that I think are genuinely deplorable, but they're also artifacts. I don't know. It's a conversation that I think is bigger than the two of us.
Yeah, big time. But because we're a Bond show, I mean, some people may even say, and we may even get comments on this video about, hey, you're not reviewing the books, you're reviewing the movies. Well,
that's totally fair.
It is the source material these movies are based on. So it would be hard to not at least bring up that source material and how it translates to film. That's what
totally,
it makes for the conversations we have about these movies. Let us know in the comments below. What do you think? Like I said, I'll leave a link to the article in the description box. And if you have anything you want to let us know or talk about with us in the comments about, please absolutely do. That's what this whole episode was about. Is we want to interact with you. We want to talk about James Bond with you.
Absolutely.
What problems you have, what you love, what you don't like, that's what this is all about. And it's all, again, in good fun. And these are just simply our opinions.
Yes.
So, and we totally realize that there's going to be disagreements, but as long as we can keep it nice, we're fine with that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yep. But that's really about it for this episode. I mean, this was a lot of fun. I've never really been in a position with anything I've done. I've been in bands. I have 2 podcasts. I do a lot of things that I hope I get interaction from people on. And this has been the thing that has been the most interactive so far. So it's been one of those where it's like, I've got to keep a mind about this and actually talk about it a little bit. And when people do come to us with problems or things they love or hate, pros and cons, I definitely want to address that with them. So
definitely.
Thank you so much to everybody who has been doing that with us. And we, as I said, we try to do this show when we can, as often as we can. We try to get them edited and out as quickly as possible. We don't want to put out anything that's not going to be entertaining for you. So, I mean, we put a lot of time and effort into these. So please just bear with us. If we get spare time, we will do it. We will do it as quickly as we can.
Because it's a joy to do. It really is.
We've got a lot more movies to go. There may be a point where I'm like, okay, I'm over Bond, dude. Like this, I'm done with this. It may never come. It may, we'll see. I mean, we still got a lot of Roger Moore movies to get through, and the Pierce Brosnan era that I'm kind of not looking forward to. I've heard bad things, but we'll get there. We'll get there eventually. It may take a couple of years, but we will get there. Yeah. But again, if you like this video, if you want to see us talk about more of your comments and whatnot, please let us know in the comments below if you'd like us to do this from time to time. We will be coming back as soon as we can with Man with the Golden Gun, the next one in the Roger Moore era. So we're actually going to record that right after we get done with this here. But thank you so much for joining me on this, Nathan. Thanks for your opinions. Thanks for being the cue to my James Bond.
It's my pleasure. My sincerest pleasure.
And until Man with the Golden Gun,
stay shaken.
Never stirred.